So sometimes skin cancers, although they're usually pretty minor and easily corrected, they can grow insidiously and sometimes can lead to the removal of a large part of your face. So this is not something that you want to ignore. So I've come to you and you look at something and you say, I think that's a cancer. What do you do next?
First thing we'll do is we'll biopsy it. We will we'll anesthetize the area. We'll sample the lesion, essentially remove the lesion if it's not just huge, and we'll send it to the pathologist and get an exact diagnosis of what's going on.
So it comes back and it says this is a basal cell cancer. That's it? You've cut them and it's gone and that's the end of it?
Not necessarily. We get the diagnosis back and there's multiple subtypes of basal cell carcinomas. Depending on the subtype, the location on the body, the appearance of it, does it look like it's an aggressive one? Does it look like it's diving deep into the subcutaneous tissue? There's a few ways to treat those. Superficial basal cell carcinomas you can treat with topical medications such as Aldera. That would be one that you could use. Other things you can do to a nodular or a superficial basal cell carcinoma would be electrodesiccation and curettage, where we scrape the cancer to remove it and you treat the area. The next step would be excision, and we do that in our clinic as well. And beyond that, in areas that are somewhat tricky that require saving as much skin as we can, such as the rim of a nose or an eyelid, Mohs surgery.
So basically you're going to decide up front, this is small enough we can just slice it off and there's nothing to worry about. Or you may decide that you want to just put a little ointment on it. What does the ointment do?
The ointment gets your immune system to the area, and your immune system attacks the cancerous cells to remove it.
And cures it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you just scrape it off. But how often is a more extensive surgery done too? I mean, what I've heard of is that in Mohs surgery, you cut a piece out, you look at it under the microscope, you make sure there's no cancer there. If there is, you cut a little more out and you make sure that it's all removed. And when I had my first one, they had to remove a piece of my nose the size of my finger. And immediately thereafter, I went to a plastic surgeon who made me look so beautiful.
He did a great job. He did
they
a great
did
job.
do a great job, right? If you think about it. But so how do you decide that someone, and how often is it severe enough that plastic surgery is needed?
It's rare that plastic surgery is needed. Usually those are the cancers that have been let go for quite some time. Most Mohs surgeons will actually do their own repair, and they do quite good work. The Mohs surgeons that we utilize, the majority do their own repairs. Unless it's an eyelid lesion, sometimes they'll need to get an oculoplastics involved for that.
So the more sensitive the area, the more dangerous. So if you have a lesion on the side of your eye that doesn't heal, that could cause you serious problems if you ignore it.
Exactly.
And you know, it's incredible to me how sometimes I see people who've just got the most horrendous looking thing on their face. Are you crazy? So don't ignore little things that do not heal. So you cut them off. Now, what's the difference between if you diagnose a squamous cancer? There is a difference,
exactly.
Isn't there?
The first segment we talked about basal cell, and I was saying that it's essentially problematic for the area where it's located. You know, you can lose your nose or your ear. Now, squamous cell carcinomas can be a quite life-threatening situation if you ignore that. Now, fortunately, in our clinic, we don't see that too often. It's the patient that comes in who's ignored a squamous cell carcinoma that has a bad outcome.
So it can actually spread from the skin to other places.
Yes.
And if that happens, it could be life-threatening.
Exactly.
But they look the same. Is that true, or do they look different?
Look the same as what?
As a basal cell.
No, they look a little different. The basal cells are usually shiny, pearly, can be confused with a pimple a lot of times. The squamous cells are usually a bump that pops up in the skin that has a crusty top to it sometimes. A little different appearance than a basal cell.
So if you've had a lot of exposure to the sun, we'll talk about that, and you have lots of things on your face that look a little worrisome, you better go to a dermatologist. Lastly, let's talk about the worst skin cancer, melanoma, which actually is reaching epidemic proportions as I understand it.
That's true.
Why is it increasing so much?
Because of the sun exposure that people have been getting for the last 20, 30, 40 years, and beyond actually. The more sun exposure that our communities and the individuals get, the more at risk we're going to be for melanoma.
So I had heard, and I don't know if you agree with this, that basal and squamous cell cancers are related to the total amount of sun you've been exposed to. But one of the biggest risk factors for melanoma is a sunburn. Is that true? So if you have, like I did, every single summer, not only did I burn, but I bled. And I had pieces of my face. I loved taking off the skin from a bad sunburn as a kid. And actually, 2 or 3 members of my family have had melanomas. Fortunately, they've been cured. So what do we do about melanoma? Who should consider, what should you do if you notice something that you might find out to be a melanoma? What does a person need to be concerned about?
Yeah, the first thing is to get proper diagnosed. Go to a dermatologist, have the lesion biopsied. The biopsy itself is important. You got to make sure that you get under the lesion to where we get an adequate sample to send to the pathologist and stage the lesion. Based on staging, if it's less than 1 millimeter deep, simple excision has a very high cure rate. So catching them early is very important.
So, I mean, I've heard that there are some specific signs that the general public should be aware of that might make them think of a melanoma, like a mole that becomes darker. What else are there?
Yeah, the A, B, C's, D's, and E's of melanoma. A is asymmetry. If you were to fold the mole in half and it would be different on each side if it were asymmetrical, that's a warning flag. B, irregular borders or jagged borders. C, multiple colors within the same lesion. So if you have a mole that's 2 or 3 different colors. D, diameter bigger than 6 millimeters or bigger than a pencil eraser. And I think the most important one is E, evolving or changing with time. Those are the classic warning signs for a mole that could be concerning.
And it's one of the leading causes of cancer deaths today. And unfortunately, once it's spread, the opportunities, even though things are improving everywhere, the opportunities for cure are really quite small. When we come back, we're going to talk some more about how to prevent these cancers. So don't go away.